Hey, all. It's been 9 years ago this month when my mother passed away. To me, it's as if it happened yesterday. But here we are, 1 year away from her 10th anniversary of her passing. And I got to say is, I feel her presence around me a lot. We're filming in my backyard, and we're going to talk about my mother. 9 years ago, this month, she passed away from cancer. Not one cancer, but two cancers at the same time, believe it or not. And I would have to say, for somebody to battle cancer, two cancers, I should say, at the same time, and live up to a year and a half after being diagnosed with cancer, I got to say, you got to be tough to do that. Because I got to say, my mother was a strong-willed person. That's the one thing what I can say about her. She was never somebody who would not go down, at least not trying. Because I used to get after her about that. Because I used to tell her, if you're not going to try, then you're going to go out pathetic. You got to try to accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Because unfortunately, my mother was not one who liked to listen. She had to have been the absolute worst person when it comes to listening. Now, how many parents, or mothers, I should say, can say that after 9 years of their passing, that their sons or their daughters are still keeping their parents' memory alive and well and strong? That's probably a question that we ask ourselves that probably cannot ever be answered, unless if you have a way of reconnecting from the dead, from the other side to the living. That's probably a question that none of us can answer. And that is essentially what I did with my mother. And when my mother passed away, she impacted a lot of people. Like, for example, like I said one time last year, when my mother was fighting cancer. She was fighting two cancers at the same time. Ovarian cancer and lung cancer. And she actually beat cancer on the first battle, but it came back. I mean, when she beat cancer the first time, I'd say it was gone for about 3 months. It came back. Her hair was growing back. She was doing well. She was enjoying life. And then it came back. But this time, it killed her. I can tell you right now, when my mother lived here in Porter's Lake, on the eastern shore, Porter's Lake is still considered, by the province of Nova Scotia, the eastern shore. I can tell you right now, she did not like her time here in Porter's Lake. She despised it. She regretted coming out here. Because she realized when we lived in Cole Harbor, when we moved to Porter's Lake, things were mighty different. Well, we'll talk about myself for starters. I had friends. At the age of 3 years old to 4, that whole year when you're starting to explore, meet friends and stuff, I had friends. A fair amount of friends. So when we go to Porter's Lake, which was, you could consider the boondocks back then, because Porter's Lake was not what you see today. Nothing like it at all. It was very different. Very, very extremely rural back then. So I go from having a big pile of friends to nobody. Why was that? Because Porter's Lake was not what you see today. Porter's Lake was and still is a middle class and rich community. Still is to this very day. Back then, there was no public transit, no taxi service like in the city. Porter's Lake wasn't even part of the city back then. Now it is because of the amalgamation. Things were mighty different. Because of the necessary necessities that a person would need to survive in a community, My mother's pleasures of living on the eastern shore of Porter's Lake had grown to become more and more distant from being enjoyable to uncomfortable to not wanting to be there. She regretted coming out here more or less. And I can't tell you how many stories she told me. She said, Adam, when I filed for divorce back in 1996, that was the best thing I ever did. And she said the biggest regret she ever made was moving out here to the Eastern Shore. It wasn't worth it. And I would have to say that her decision to file for divorce was the appropriate thing to do, because back then, my parents would making decisions that was concerning. And I can tell you right now, the marriage counselors that they went through, each counselor, everybody who they went to had stated, I think your decision moving to the community of Porter's Lake is it's something that you really need to reevaluate. Basically, you shouldn't have went out there. And that's essentially what had happened. She was never a person to put herself ahead of me and my brother. She always looked after us first. But I can tell you right now, when she passed away on September 19th of 2015, it was a peaceful passing. She passed away in her sleep, very peaceful. And I can tell you right now, from all the literature and all the people I spoke with who had encountered death, went through it, who was lucky enough to come back from it, one of the things what I learned and what I found out was that death is painless. You don't feel it. You go to sleep and you don't wake up from it. That's basically what happens, what they say. And I gotta say is, when my mother moved back in the city, she was known for her generosity. She was helping people out during difficult situations when she was in a difficult situation herself. If you were to talk to me, if you were to talk to either of my cousins, her brothers, her sisters, they would all say that she was in difficult times herself, but yet she's going out there helping somebody in need. And it makes you question, are they helping themselves? It makes you wonder. And that's the way she was. What was it? A year before she passed away in 2014. At her funeral, there was a story told about her. A woman needed a coach. She had no coach. So my mother gave her brand new coach to this woman who had nothing. And this woman looked at my mother and she said, all right, but what do you got to sit on? My mother looked at her and said, as long as I have something to sit on, it doesn't have to be much. That's all that counts. If you're going to talk to my cousin Christine, if you're going to talk to my cousin Derek, if you're going to talk to my Uncle Larry, if you're going to suddenly. If you're going to talk to any of them, one of the things what they're going to say is, it's all true. Her generosity, everybody who she tried to help, it's all true. But she had hardly anything herself to give away. Back then, the housing crisis was starting to peak. It was starting to happen. She was working at Canadian Linen for, what was it back then? $10 an hour. Next to nothing. Today, $10 an hour is not even the minimum wage. Even when her job security didn't pay much. But she was able to afford her apartment. She was able to afford a living. She was more happier. And one of the things that I often say is that if you're not happy in life, then there's no point of doing what you're doing if you're not happy. She was happy after when she filed for divorce and she was working at her Canadian Linen, John Deere in Burnside. She didn't have much. She was happy. She stated the worst single mistake she ever made in life was moving to the Eastern Shore. She didn't like it. Not at all. And I can tell you right now, my mother with me had made sure that I didn't repeat the same mistakes that she made when she was a kid. Me, if you heard her backstories about me, you always hear me saying that I was always in danger of quitting. high school. Actually, I was at the legal age to quit dropping out of school when I was in junior high, grade 9. She knew that I'm liable to try it. There was a big high risk that I was going to try to drop out. She knew that. But she only knew, legally, she couldn't do anything to prevent it if I wanted to go. And I can tell you right now, me dropping out was very, very strong attempts of happening. Why did I not drop out? That's a question that I can't even answer. I actually regret it. Part of me says I regret not dropping out of high school when I went to Eastern Shore District High. I regret it. You often hear me saying, I regret not dropping out of high school. I said that many times in documentaries, around former classmates, friends, family members. You always hear me saying that. Adam Conrod says he regrets not dropping out of high school. And it's true. Because I was never happy there. The opportunities that what I needed to fulfill a reasonable lifestyle was not on the Eastern Shore. She was like that. When she was trying to prevent me from not quitting high school, she was protecting me from making the same mistakes what she says she made when she was younger. That's just the kind of person she was. She was a very strong-willed person. Very strong. She didn't back down for nothing. No corruption. No nothing from anybody. She never backed down. She never went down without a battle. That's just the way she was. And I can tell you right now, when I was a kid growing up, if you know my background, you would also know I was big in wrestling. And I was connected with that famous wrestler you used to see on TV called Bret Hart. I can tell you right now, most parents, most mothers out there would not want to be doing everything to keep their kid out of wrestling. Especially if they're good enough to make it to the professional level like I was and did. She was putting me into wrestling, doing everything what a normal mother wouldn't do. She would put me into it. And I can tell you right now, there was a time when the Hart family wrestling school in Calgary was open. My mother was trying to find the wrestling camp. Stu Hart. My mother was trying to find it. Because basically what was going to happen was she was going to put me on a plane, fly me out to Calgary. You go there and you'll go through your wrestling training. But a lot of people didn't realize Stu Hart at the time, at the time he was healthy enough to show you what you needed to do, but he didn't run the wrestling school. It was his son, Bruce. And later on, I told that story to Brett when I met him. And he said, those are the kind of people what we had. We had that happen. And he said sometimes we had student wrestlers training, living in his father's house, his mansion, the Hart family mansion. Now it's just a museum on display for fans to go tour. The Brett, in his mind, that's his home. But that's the kind of person my mother was. She put me in that because she knew I was good at it. I believe, when was it, 2005, I turned professional? What does that tell you? Wrestling was something that I enjoyed doing. And I can tell you right now, when I went to the wrestling in 1996, my grandfather passed away. My mother's father passed away. That's when I won a medal. I wanted to put it on my grandfather's head, in his coffin, just before it shut. But I wasn't at his funeral. I could have been, for some reason, my mother did not want me or my brother at her father's funeral. Didn't want it. And she knew that I would have gave my grandfather that wrestling medal that I won at that wrestling tournament back in 1996 it was. 2005 is when I turned professional. And I got to tell you right now, she was a very strong-willed person. I'll tell you right now, when I was a kid, my favorite TV show, was the only show that could keep me quiet, was that Dukes of Hazzard. She had me in that little chair, and you could rock back and forth on the floor. She put the TV on Channel 9. The Dukes of Hazzard would come on. For a whole hour, she's all excited. Boy, I can do what I want now. I was going to shut up and not scream and going because there's this TV show. Every Christmas, my mother's mother or my mother herself would always have the generally there for me under my Christmas tree during Christmas. Always. It's either going back and forth. It's either my mother gave it to me or my grandmother gave it to me. One or the other. And to this day, I have 20 generalies, and one of them, Catherine Bach herself, who played Daisy Duke, signed it. It's not at my house. It's hidden away for security reasons. But she had signed it. And I remember when my mother, she realized that Catherine Bach actually signed my generally. She was actually shocked to see it, excited to see it, and said, well, at least you met her. And I did. But as years went on, and when I went to the political field, she hated the politics, me in politics. She hated it. She didn't want me there. I can tell you a story right now. When I worked with Peter Kelly during these 2004, 2008 municipal elections, she hated it. She hated it with a passion. She often said, Adam, politics is the worst thing that you can, why you waste your time in it? That's the worst thing you can ever put your time on right there. Because she said, you're going to bring up stuff that matters to you in the community. They're not going to address it or ever will address it because they're too busy worried about their wealthy pensions or their own well-being. And if they have to, she said, Adam, they will try to humiliate you in the press, the paper, any way to do it so they can look after themselves. And she wasn't too far off. And my mother said, I didn't like Peter Kelly. He just got that look. He looks sneaky. I don't trust him. You got that look to him. He said, you want to be friends with Peter Kelly, you want to work with him, that's your business. But she just said, leave the election stuff out of her apartment. Don't bring it out here. Don't want to see it. And I did. It's just her wishes. And I'll tell you right now, I heard from big name politicians since I've been involved in politics. Gloria McCloskey was the big one. Justin Trudeau, you all see me at Sackville High in Lower Sackville during his town hall meeting. And before Justin Trudeau became the Prime Minister, he was just a member of Parliament. And during that time, he was running for the Liberal leadership race. And also at the time, I was a card-carrying party member of the Liberal Party of Canada. So you can guess who picked up the phone and called my house and who asked for me, without me knowing or realizing who's on the other end of that phone. So I answered it. Justin Trudeau on the other end. Me and Justin Trudeau talked about a good 20 minutes on the phone before we hung up and went on with our stuff. Good guy, not very realistic. He always had his idea was his way, it's going to solve everything overnight. Don't worry about it, it's always going to work. But in my opinion, his ideas wasn't very realistic. And I can tell you right now, my mother said, Adam, there's only one politician who she had respected that you've been involved with the entire time, and she said that was Peter Stauffer. The rest of them, throw them out. They're not worth 5 cents. And I can tell you right now, my mother knew me well. I'm going to tell you something right now. When my mother passed away, not very long after, I started having encounters with her. My last encounter was was the last week. Dreaming or having this dream. It had been happening quite a bit. I was in her apartment. I realized it was her apartment. But I was saying to myself, how can this be her apartment if she's been dead for 9 years? I questioned myself, said, wouldn't her apartment be up for opening for somebody else? How can a person hold an apartment if they've been dead for 9 years, which means they could have been making no rent payments to keep the apartment? And I was starting to realize this didn't make sense. So I heard this woman walking up the steps because I knew how she walked. That's her walk. And then I heard her make the sound go, like she always did before she would open her door to the apartment. And she said something. I forget what she said, but I heard her voice. And the voice, I remember when she spoke up. I said, I haven't heard that voice in 9 years. Whoa. And then I realized it was my mother on the other end of the door that was supposed to open up the door. And then just when the door opened, I woke up. And people told me and said, Adam, that was a paranormal encounter you just encountered. I would say they're right, but they're wrong at the same time. The problem is with us, with death, this is my opinion. We don't understand death. We all think it's the inevitable that we don't understand. When really, death is something that we don't understand because our minds is just not capable of accepting or understanding what death really is. A lot of scientists are saying that death is a big nothing. It's just a continuation of life. But I can tell you right now, I truly believe I understand why my mother had to communicate to myself after when she passed away. Because I am the closest thing that what she was when she was here among us. My personality and her personality is dead on. Perfect. And she knows that. She knows that I'm the closest thing that she can get to the living. What I gotta say is, death is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that we all go through. We have to be open about it, respectful of it, respectful of others who go through it. And I gotta say is, when my mother passed away, I knew what to do. It wasn't, see, when mother passed away, there was no crying, there was no nothing. It was a lot like I said before, a boxing match. You're in a boxing match with this unknown person, and they unload the final blow. It's going to put you out, you know it, and it hit you, and I took it, but it went to my stomach. But when that fatal blow hit me, you would think it'd be pain, it'd be suffering, and all this stuff. It was love. It was joy. It was happiness. And a lot of people told me, said, Adam, that could have been Jesus Christ with you, standing with you when he had to take your mother to the other side, to cross her over to where she needs to be. Because her body's no more. She's no longer in that body. She's where she needs to be, in her new body on the other side. And I say they're probably right. Because I sense my mother around me. All her judgments, her personality, everything. Me and her were just like twins, just in another body. Everything. But ultimately what it came down to when my mother got cancer, she was a person who you couldn't tell anything. She wouldn't listen to anything. I went to her to get some help with her weight gain. She was eating donairs on a daily basis. You wouldn't think that even existed. Junk food that you can't eat on a steady basis. That's what she was doing. Why was she doing that? In my opinion, I know my mother well. It was a depression mode. She didn't want to get out of it. She couldn't get out of it. She didn't know how to get out of it. That's my opinion of what happened. Did I reach out to her to get her some help? I did. I reached out to her brother Larry. He went up to my mother for help. No prevail. My mother's cousin Diane, who's now passed away, reached out to my mother to get her some help. No prevail. Actually, my mother's cousin Diane did a lot of stuff to get her proactive. No prevail. I bought her, actually it was my brother, bought her USB stick, music. And I remember telling him, buy her music that she listens to, a hit piece, and get her out the door and get her some walk. Because why did I say that? Because if you use, this is what I do. I'll play my MP3 player, whatever you want to call it, US, whatever you call it now, with music on it. It will manipulate your mind, and you can actually walk and go further than what you can actually think you can go. And that's what I do. And that's what me and my brother are trying to do with my mother. Because she'd be burning off this fat, not even realizing it, all this weight, this calories that she don't need. Next thing you know, she went, wow, this trick actually worked. Yeah. But she couldn't do it. She had no will. You know, I mean, really, when you look at it, her hands were tied to the floor. Ultimately, what it comes down to, my best advice to you right now is, if you're dealing with a family member who don't want to do anything to help themselves, I'm going to tell you right now, your hands are literally tied. There's nothing you can do. It's up to them themselves if they want to help themselves. If they don't, there's nothing you can do. But I can tell you right now, it's a death that could have been avoided. She didn't have to have cancer. She didn't have to have two cancers at the same time. You know, it was a very bad, bad, bad situation to be in. I mean, the city of Halifax didn't help it none. She lived on Gaston Road in Dartmouth. During 2014, they had a natural gas line, Heritage gas line, back up. They had to evacuate the community. There's my mother in her apartment on Gaston Road with cancer. Can't get out. So I picked up the phone. The mayor's office cursed out Mike Savage. I didn't give a shit. I told Mike, I don't give a shit if you're the mayor right now. I don't give a shit. I cursed him out. Told me, Mike Savage is quite respectful. Even though he came across language he didn't prefer to hear. But when you see the stupidity of the city and what's going on, and here's a cancer patient, you got to have a backup plan. All right, what do we do when this stuff happens? Why do we have a gas line backup? What is it? If these gas lines are posing a risk to people, that can't happen. Why are we hooking them up to their apartments and to their homes in the first place? It shouldn't be. Something that's posing a risk to people's lives and their well-being should not be approved to be hooked up to their home in the first place. He was very respectful of that. And I got to tell you right now, my mother is a person. See, she never got back to me on that. Because she knew I'd pick up the phone with Mike Savage, no problem at all. She knew that. But she was a person who really, see, my Uncle Larry said it best. He said, you know why? Well, she said, for starters, you're right. It's a depression mode that she was going in. But she said, you know why? She was eating the food that she should have been eating, living the unhealthy lifestyle that really you shouldn't be doing, even though we all do it. He said, it's easier for them to give in than it is to fight the temptation and do what's right. Because you actually got to get up and you got to do something. And if you're somebody that's not much of a person to get up and change habits or something, or whatever the case may be, it can be an uphill battle. And that's exactly what was going on. My mother found it easier to give in than it is to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go in the other direction. That's the way she was. But when my mother left the Eastern Shore, she filed her divorce. That was the best decision she ever made. I say she's right. And I can tell you right now, I came across relatives, my Aunt Doreen, was a giant tiger in Dartmouth. I was just shopping around looking for stuff. She didn't see me. She haven't seen me in something like 6 years. And I stopped the cart, and she looking, who the hell would have that kind of gulp to stop me when I'm shopping? And she looked up at me, and I go, you know who I am? No. So I told her, look again. Oh, it's Adam. Yeah. And she said, gee, Adam, I didn't know who that was stopped me right there. I said, well, if I didn't stop your cart, you would have going on with her way. And when she realized who it was, she was almost crying because she realized, don't you ever look like your mother. And I had her mom's coworkers look at me. She said, you look just like your mother walking through the door here. Just as if she's just in a man's body, that's all. And I remember when my mother passed away at her funeral, her coworkers were quite choked up that my mother passed away. And my mother's cousin, Diane, she was off the side crying at my mother's funerals. And I walked by. And she just snapped herself together, She seen me, and I knew she was crying and stuff. And after her funeral was over, I went back to her house. And she looked at me and she said, wow, said, your mother, Donna, she passed away. I did not expect that. Because the reason why my mother's cousin Diane said, wow, your mother passed away, I did not expect that, because she was younger than her cousin. My mother was her first cousin. My mother was 58. There's her cousin, 73. She was very shocked. And when my mother's cousin Diane passed away, something like 2 years later, she said, she often told me, she said, Adam, you actually fulfilled your mother's empty void spot when she left. She said, when you were here, I could feel her presence because nobody knew her better than you. And there's a story about my mother. I'm going to tell you this. When my mother was fighting cancer, when she was dying of cancer, my mother's cousin Diane was also fighting cancer. My mother was down at her cousin Diane's house, helping her clean up her house, helping her out when she was dying of cancer. My mother's cousin Diane told me, said, Adam, your mother walked about 2 kilometers down to my house when she was dying of cancer. That's the kind of person she was. And when the both of them were fighting cancer at the same time, when she knew that my mother passed away, she basically looked back and see me and my brother staring back at my mother. She passed away. It bothered her because she stated that she'd rather take her spot than have her cross over, because she said, all my kids are all grown up. My grandchildren are doing well. She said, here's Adam and his brother. Their mother just passed away, her cousin. She was bothered by it. And she wanted to take her spot, is what she wanted to do. But I looked at my mother's cousin, Diane, and said, unfortunately, we can't make that decision. The Lord made his decision. You have to accept it, if you like it or not. And now my mother's on the other side to on her next journey in life. And here I am coming across all these encounters with her. One encounter I had with her was she regretted not listening. She actually wanted to come back. And I told her, you can't come back. I can't bring you back. You're still alive, but your body is no longer. It's no longer in existence. You told me when I was 6 years old that she wanted to be cremated. So me and my brother on the phone. Like I said, her cousin Billy Cleary was an undertaker, a retired undertaker. So he asked me, I'm going to do this, make this happen if you want it. And I told him, well, my mother said she wants to be cremated. And that's what we did. And that's what I told my mother when I had that other encounter with her. Your body's no longer existent. Your ashes are still in an urn. You didn't want to be buried. You didn't want nothing. You said, spread my ashes. I don't care. So me and my brother left it at that. So, but 9 years after my mother's passing, here we are doing this. Her memory's still alive and well. So all I got to say is this is my mother's 9th year of her passing, her anniversary of her passing. Next year, we're going to have T-shirts made up. We're going to give them to her family. Her brothers, her sisters, her cousins, her nieces. We're going to go that route. So I got to say is, if you have a family member that passes away, don't grieve. Celebrate their life for what they were. Because you don't want to grieve something that's not worth grieving. Celebrate their life. Enjoy their life and what they had here on earth.